The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 11th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When John heard in prison what the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" Jesus answered them, "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." As they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to look at? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out to see? Someone dressed in soft robes? Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal palaces. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.' Truly I tell you, among those born of women, no one has arisen greater than John the Baptist. Yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I'm sure we've all heard the old adage, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I really believe that. I think it's important for people to ask questions. I like asking questions. And I know I've said it before, but people complain that I usually answer their question with another question of my own, instead of a statement or an answer. This is because questions are good. They get us thinking. They help us learn new things or remember lost things. And they help us to be able to articulate different things that we know or believe. But still, there's this perception to these so-called stupid questions. To the hearer or the askee, they feel like a waste of time because they're either addressing the obvious or asking the unanswerable. But for the one who's asking the question, we're usually hesitant to ask because either we feel like we should know already, or we have to be very vulnerable to ask that question in the first place. I think that's why we get so excited when someone else asks the questions that we wanted to ask before we ask it ourselves. Especially when, in our minds, the person asking should already know the answer to that question. Or if it doesn't happen this way, we like to add something onto the end of the question by, like, "Oh, by the way, I'm asking for a friend." You've never done that. Luckily, though, we're off the hook in today's gospel, because John the Baptist is the one asking the question that no one else dared to ask Jesus. "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? Are you really who you say you are? Are you who everyone else says you are? Are you the one who I've been saying you are? I'm not quite sure." Feels like some would consider that a stupid question because it seems so obvious. Of course this is Jesus. Of course this is the God who God sent as our Messiah. How could you question that? But for others, that question comes from a place of deep vulnerability, to the point that many wouldn't even ask it in the first place because of how others might think of them. And how dare you ask if Jesus is who he says he is? Don't you believe him? Don't you trust? There's no room for doubt. By the way, thanks for asking. I wonder how many of us have had some of those same questions about Jesus. I wonder how many of us look at what Jesus has done and ask, is this what the Savior came to do? Is this the story we're supposed to tell as followers of Christ? Is this what we're waiting for this Advent? So now here's John the Baptist. Remember, the one who for most of his career was proclaiming about the one who is to come and who was preparing the way for this Savior and who claimed that, yes, baptism was really important, but there was one coming whose baptisms were even more important. I mean, this guy knew what was going on. He knew what was to come. But now all he knew was that he was in jail. Because of all of this work he had done, because of all of the proclaiming he did to prepare the way for Jesus and to prepare us for Jesus, he was sitting in jail, waiting for what was to come for him. So it's no wonder why he's now asking, are you who I thought you were? Especially since I put it all on the line for you and you can now see what it's cost me? What's the message that Jesus sends back to John? He tells those disciples, go and tell John what you see and hear. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. At first glance, that doesn't seem like an answer, which again is typical Jesus. When asked, are you the one who is to come? Jesus says, I don't know, am I? What do you think? Look at these things I've done, and what do you gather from that? Am I who you expected? Why don't you go back to John and answer the question for yourself and tell him what you've seen here and whether you think it's God's doing or not? And I wonder what John thinks of that answer. I wonder if he thinks, sure, this sounds like great news for the blind and the lame and the lepers and the deaf and the dead and the poor. But what about me? I'm still sitting here in jail. Where's my good news? Where's my Savior? Where's the one who I've been predicting and preparing for? Is he still to come? Again, this seems and sounds familiar to us already. I mean, how often do we think about this Savior and the good news he brings for the world and wonder why it doesn't feel like good news for us? Or wonder why we feel still imprisoned even after this Savior has come? Which seems to bring us back to the beginning, full circle, making us think that we can't ask those questions or have those doubts because then we wouldn't be seen as good and faithful Christians, or people might think we're asking a stupid question. So again, where does this leave us? It leaves us in Advent. It leaves us here, waiting for our Savior, being told that we're supposed to be experiencing joy and that any doubt we might have should be tucked under the pillows until the holidays are over. But that doesn't seem to bring much hope. But I do think John brings hope today. I think he tells us that we can ask questions and wonder what in the world is going on and think that things can be better for us and for those around us. The things we ask aren't stupid questions. They're deep and vulnerable ponderings about how this world works. And they are opportunities for us to engage and tell the story of why Christmas can be so important for us. And John also reminds us that we still have waiting to do. Whether we feel imprisoned or not at this moment, I think that we can be assured that good things have happened to the most vulnerable among us, that the lowly will continue to be lifted up, and that the good news of Jesus will continue to be good news, and we will continue to wait. That's easy enough, right? Like the writer of James says, be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. Be patient. I know I've mentioned to you before that I attend this Bible study with other clergy about a week and a half ahead of each Sunday to read through all of the verses we are going to preach on. And so a week and a half ago, at the particular study where we were reading these verses, I had brought Charlotte with me. And not long after we arrived, apparently I set my travel coffee mug in the very wrong spot because she quickly kicked it over and spilled half a mug full of coffee onto this church's very light beige carpeting. This led to the next 25 minutes of me trying to sop up all of this coffee from the carpet with the only thing I could find, the thinnest paper towels I could find in their bathroom. 25 minutes. And so in the midst of sopping up this coffee out of the carpet, I hear James's words read, "Be patient." And when those words were read, the person who was reading stopped, and everyone in the room turned and looked at me. Be patient. This is not to say that I am the model of patience. I can tell you that is surely not the case. If this had happened at the end of the study and everyone was packing up to go to lunch, I guarantee you I would not have spent 25 minutes sopping up that coffee. I mean, at that point, sliding the couch over a few inches to cover the spill would have sufficed just fine. But this all reminded me that we're not good at waiting. We're not good with patience. James continues, the farmer waits for this precious crop from the earth, being patient with it until it receives the early and late rains. I feel like we're patient in those areas, but I still think this speaks to us. When we're waiting and we're trying to be patient, what are we doing? Other stuff, right? There's always other things to do. There's always equipment to fix. There are chores to be done. There's always things that need done on our to-do list. When I hear James's reading, I picture a patient farmer who plants his crop, goes and parks his tractor, brings the truck back to the field, puts down the tailgate, sits down, and waits. And watches. And waits for that first shoot to come up. That farmer does nothing else in the meantime except to focus on that one thing that is happening with patience. Can we be that patient? Can we wait in such a way as that? Brothers and sisters, a prophet has come. A Savior has come. And even in the midst of our doubts and questions, we know that God is with us and the good news is at hand. And together, with patience, we wait for what is to come. Amen.